I've been asked to share with you the story of gender champions in nuclear policy. The Gender Champions, this is a picture taken on the day of its launch in November of 2018. And there's, you can't see her very well because it's kind of blurry. There's Ambassador Jenkins, who was part of this effort from the beginning. So we'll just start with, what's the point? What's the issue? The goal of Gender Champions in nuclear policy is to promote the presence, the visibility, and the impact of women in the nuclear field. As we know, women are extremely underrepresented in the nuclear community at all areas, whether it's policy or technology, private sector, government, research, academia. And the level of participation is always well under 50%, and sometimes even in single digits. This is not because people haven't been working on this effort. Both Ambassador Jenkins and I have been part of a range of efforts and activities aimed at what I call bottom-up or side-out activities to improve the role of women in these kinds of fields, whether it's peer mentoring, or whether it's skills building, or whether it's networking. There's a whole range of stuff that women and a few male allies have done for ourselves, but that stubborn underrepresentation shows that there are, in fact, institutional barriers that are not able to be changed simply by this kind of self-organization that we've seen. And so, but why does it matter that we have women, fully represented in the nuclear community? And one key point is that the diversity, we have research from all different sorts of environments that show that the diversity of experience improves the outcomes of an organization, whether it's a Wall Street company or an academic institution or a technical environment. The more diverse perspectives and experience that can be around the decision-making table, the better the outcomes are. Secondly, nuclear issues represent major challenges that need all hands on deck, whether it is making sure that nuclear materials are secured, whether it is managing the Iran deal, whether it is revitalizing the multilateral infrastructure that addresses nuclear security, which is what I lectured on the last time I was with you last week. These all have important, these are challenges that are just too big to leave to only a small portion of the population. And we know that women can bring new and different and successful solutions to these problems. And I want to say also, given the STEM focus of this community, is that almost every problem I just mentioned has a technical component to it. So this is not simply an issue of policy. There's lots of technical angles in this issue. And the other reason why this matters is just one of basic fairness, of equity, of human rights, and the importance that every individual has a chance to pursue their own interests and to be fairly compensated and recognized for the quality that they bring to the issue. And so what this adds up to is a focus on leaders. The top leaders of organizations are necessary if we're going to see the kind of institutional change that's needed to really get to a level of equity in the presence, visibility, and impact of women. So the Gender Champions is aimed at that leadership of identifying the leaders of organizations who work in some way on nuclear policy, which includes a whole range of topics, from nuclear disarmament to nuclear deterrence, non-proliferation, nuclear security, nuclear safety, nuclear research and development, almost nuclear energy, almost any kind of aspect of nuclear issues is welcomed and encouraged within this leadership network. As I mentioned, we launched the Gender Champions with 18 commitments from leaders committed to be part of this effort and to use their role of being leaders to change their organizations and their communities. We've seen that growth from 18 all the way up to currently 66. This chart reflects where we were when we published our first impact report, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But we've had continued growth during 2020. Even in the midst of the pandemic, we added 16 new champions, and we're continuing to grow. The kinds of communities that make up the Gender Champions Network are quite broad. The network was initially envisioned to focus on non-government organizations, on advocacy communities, and the foundations or philanthropies that fund them. And you can see those make up, roughly 75%. Those groups make up roughly 75% of the Gender Champions community. But we have been growing beyond that to include professional associations, which is one of our largest additional wedges here, private sector or government contractors, research and consultancy organizations, academic institutions as well. And within here, we have additionally a nuclear fuel cycle company, we have a media company, and we have several US national laboratories who have joined. And so there's a lot of diversity of the type of organization. And as you can see, the size of the organization as well. Some of these organizations are quite small, some of them are quite large. So what is it that makes up being a gender champion? As I said, the gender champions are the heads of their organization, and the organization only needs to have some portion of it that works on nuclear issues. It doesn't need to be the whole dedicated mission of the organization. And then we asked the champions to make several public pledges. The first pledge that all of them make is called the Panel Parity Pledge. And this is done in recognition that in the nuclear world, there are just too many all-male panels. We've all seen it. There's a phrase that we call it a manel, and with the recognition that this is not a compliment. These kinds of all-male panels imply that women's views are not valid or welcome in a certain community or a certain area of expertise. It limits the visibility of female experts, and we know that visibility is critical to attracting new women into the field. And it also denies women, access to a key professional metric of how frequently are you invited to be a speaker, how frequently are your papers asked to be presented, and so on. And so one way to push back on this is to have champions pledge to avoid, whenever possible, appearing on all-male panels. And since our champions majority of our champions are male, this is a very powerful way for them to use their own social capital and their own power in the field to speak, to leverage the inclusion of women in the panels that they speak on. And so they are the champions, or someone acting on behalf of the champion, will ask organizers who may be inviting them to speak, what are you doing to ensure gender diversity at your event? Are there other women speakers on this panel or on other panels? Do you need help finding women speakers? Here are some names of women in the field that would do a great job on a panel. And so in some cases, the champions actually refuse to participate in all-male panels. And if you look at the ranking here from the end of 2020 based on performance during 2019, we see that the vast majority of champions were able to uphold the pledge. Now, some of our champions take a modified pledge because their organization's commitment is, in fact, to carry out all female events. And so those modified pledges are also seen to be upheld here. So this is already progress in achieving more visibility for women. The other thing that the champions do is they make commitments that that we call SMARTY commitments. And I've asked that some of these, some aspects from this talk be dropped into the chat. So I hope that that's been put in there. The SMARTY stands for specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, time-bound, inclusive, and equitable. And so the champions are each asked to make 3 or more specific pledges that meet the SMARTY criteria, but that these pledges are customized to their own organization, again, recognizing the diversity of organizations that are present within the Gender Champions Network. Some of them are enormous, some of them are tiny, some of them have been working on gender issues for a long time, some of them are new to it. Each one has its own culture, and so different organizations need different types of pledges. And these are just some examples of the types of pledges that different champions made, whether regarding activities that happen inside their own organization for their own community, for their own employees, or whether it reflects outward-facing activities, such as how they approach the events that they host, how they, who represents them in the outside world. Some organizations, for example, to enhance representation, carry out media training for their staff, for all of their staff, to be sure that everyone is ready to work with a reporter or to be interviewed on TV, not just the men who may be at the top of the organization. Other tasks involve diversifying boards of directors. This is an area that's very challenging because boards of directors are often a generation ahead of the people who are working in an organization. And so they may be less reflective of the diversity that's available in the current workforce. Grant making was a really important part of this, and that was part of the design of Gender Champions initially, is to be sure that the grant makers were included in the process so that they could have an opportunity to influence how the grant recipients work on gender. And I should also point out that because of the public character of these commitments, many of the champions have seen the Gender Champions opportunity to make as an opportunity to make commitments for goals that go beyond gender, that touch on larger aspects of the diversity, inclusion, and equity requirements and movement within the nuclear field. And so when you go to the Gender Champions website and you click on the face of each champion, you can see what pledges they've made that work for their organization, and those are updated annually. We can see the implementation of pledges during the 2019 year, that most of the pledges were completed. Several of them were partially completed, and many of them, a handful of them, were still in progress. And one of the things that we found out was that some of the commitments actually are ongoing, and many of the champion organizations decided that they would continue to work on those commitments along the way, that they wouldn't set them aside, but they needed continuous involvement. And so they will pick additional commitments for their next year. We are just now in the process of developing the data collection plan for the commitment progress in 2020, and we'll be releasing our second impact report later this spring. So to just to point out where we are, we've really created, I think, a vibrant network of champions and the organizations that involve them. We have 66 champions and growing. And one of the things that happens, of course, is that champions leave their position and go on to new ones. So we've had several instances where we've had leadership transitions, which is an opportunity to bring somebody new into the Gender Champions fold, but also as that champion moves on to a different position, they may not be able to be a champion, to continue to be part of this network because of their new role, but they still bring that knowledge and that experience and that commitment to gender equity into their new roles. And so that's another way that the gender championship notions are spreading. Each gender champion also creates and nominates a focal point within their organization who is responsible for keeping track of the pledges that champion makes and reporting on them, and also for participating in quarterly focal point meetings where these people have a chance to share the experiences within their organization on implementing the Gender Champions commitments, and also to increase knowledge and receive briefings and updates and information about gender equity in the larger community. We've also created several special interest discussions for focal points, for example, on mentoring best practices and what different organizations are doing to enhance mentoring, either within their organization or by their members of their organization. Also a set of discussions around codes of conduct for meetings, respectful behavior policy, and so on, which is another way of expanding, gender awareness into not just the staff of an organization, but to the larger community that organization touches in terms of presentations and attendance. We have an active Twitter account that promotes gender success stories from the champions and elsewhere around the community. We have over 1,200 followers, and I would encourage each of you who are active on Twitter to join the followers for Gender Champions, GC @Nuclear Policy, as you can see the handle there. And then, as I mentioned, we develop an annual impact report that provides collective accountability. We give overall figures for achievement of various goals, and we slice the data in different ways. But the public report is not intended as a naming and shaming effort. It's intended as a success, to highlight the successes of the group as a whole. But we also offer and present private briefings to the champions and the focal point on their own performance against their own goals and how that compares with other champions, the broader collective, as a way to provide individual accountability. And I would encourage you to visit our website, gcnuclearpolicy.org. As I mentioned, it highlights the champions and their pledges. And more importantly, it collects a whole range of resources for champions and focal points to use in their own work, but also, of course, for public use. A range of reports and articles about why gender equity is critical to achieving success and to reflecting the fairness and equity in our societies. Specific toolkits for accomplishing different tasks in a gender equitable way. Lists of women experts who can participate in panels or who can be interviewed by journalists or who can be invited as co-authors for articles. A series of mentorship opportunities and job boards, and also a list of related organizations who are also active in the field and doing complementary work on the gender issues. So I haven't been able to watch the chat, but hopefully all of the links that I offered about the story of how Gender Champions was created, the inspiration that we received from a similar organization called International Gender Champions, and some other resources have been placed in the chat, and I would encourage you to follow those links and find out more about Gender Champions. So thank you so much, and I really look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Holgate. I think anybody who's listening is inspired because for me personally, before I heard of these initiatives, I just used to sit in a panel or in a meeting and just wonder, like, where are all the women? But never being able to articulate it or to say, and you just wave it away and you say, oh, maybe there's just not any female experts in this field. And it's initiatives like yours that are sort of holding organizations and institutions' feet to the fire, that are helping to actually have us see ourselves represented, whether it's about gender or if it's about race or ethnicity. And I think that's a perfect segue to Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins' presentation. We will take questions at the end. So Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins is quite illustrious in her career. If I was to read her whole bio, that would take up the rest of the time for this meeting. So I'm going to do my best to hit the highlights. The participants have access to the bios, but Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins is the founder and executive director of Women of Color Advancing Peace, Security, and Conflict Transformation. She also chairs the steering committee of Organizations in Solidarity, which she founded in 2020. It came about at the heels of the murder of George Floyd in May 2020, which the whole world witnessed and sparked a grassroots movement around the world, not just in the United States. And Ambassador Jenkins used her platform with WCAPS to sort of start dealing with these issues or tackling these issues in the fields of peace, security, and conflict transformation. And I will be attaching links at the bottom. She is also a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, senior fellow at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. She is an adjunct professor at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. She teaches future American and international diplomats on how to be great diplomats. She's an expert in the arms control, disarmament, and nonproliferation field. She was nominated by President Barack Obama in April 2009 and confirmed by the US Senate in 2009 as well as special envoy and coordinator for threat reduction programs in the Bureau of International Security and Nonproliferation, ISN, at the US State Department. She served in that position until January 2017. She is currently the nomination for US Undersecretary of International Arms Control and Security. International Security and Arms Control, my bad. And she was named the 2020 Arms Control Association Person of the Year for her initiative, which was the Organizations in Solidarity. And like I said, I could go on and on. She has drafted international treaties. She has seen them come to fruition. She has been very active in global health security agenda, as Ambassador Holgate was telling us earlier. She does it all. And she's also, I'm happy to say, one of my mentors and somebody that I derive a lot of inspiration from on a daily basis. Ambassador Jenkins, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Nomsa, for those very kind words. And Laura, always a pleasure. I feel like we have shared many platforms together, and I think we're going to continue to do so in the future, both in government and obviously outside government. And it's always been a pleasure working with you, and of course, being a part of the Gender Champions, which is such an amazing effort that you're leading. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the organization I founded in 2017 called Women of Color Advancing Peace, Security, and Conflict Transformation. And the interesting thing is, one of the main reasons why I did establish the organization is because, having been in this field of arms control and nonproliferation for many years, and not seeing, not really having a lot of people who look like me in the field. Certainly, and I'm very happy that we have, I started working in this field in the early 90s. And so now seeing a lot more women, particularly young women, which I'm glad to see continues, and I hope will grow. And I hope that women will stay in the field throughout their careers. So that has been really wonderful to see. The number of people of color has been much slower in terms of increasing representation in the field. And that was really the initial reason why I started the organization, is because I was feeling as if I didn't see a cadre of people behind me. And, I didn't see a pipeline. And I realized that we needed to do something about that. And then when I started the organization, I really expanded it to peace and security, to not be just the arms control issues. One, because as mentioned, the work that I was doing in infectious disease, but also because I used to work at the Ford Foundation. And when I worked there, my portfolio was pretty broad in terms of issues of international security, but also issues of peace and security. And so I was able to see, by having that portfolio, the connections that exist between what they call soft security and hard security, which I think are increasingly becoming closer and closer, which is something I teach at Georgetown, is, how we need to look at these international threats more globally, more holistically. But my real reason, as I said, was to increase the voices of people of color, particularly women, because when we lack peace and security, it's women of color around the world who are most impacted. And yet, you don't see that representation in policymaking circles, either in government or outside government, because as you know, a lot of entities impact policies, not just government. It's NGOs, it's think tanks, it's research institutions, academic institutions, philanthropy that put money in the field. These all have an impact on foreign policy. And so there's not representation in a lot of those places. And even in areas where you see more people of color, it's usually not the ones who are in the decision-making roles. So it's not only just bringing more people in the field, more keeping them in the field, interesting them in the field throughout the pipeline, but also recognizing that we have to make sure that we are in the decision-making roles, and also creating a cadre of experts in that process. So I started WCAPS really for that reason. And so as I'll show you, I have some slides as well. And I want to talk through, as I go through the slides, the fact that the reason for it, as I said, but also understanding what, we're trying to do. I had the honor of being part of this discussion in Africa. I think it was a year and a half ago, when we are actually able to travel, which we can't do now. So I'm so glad to see that these programs are continuing. So as I said, it's very important, particularly in the areas of peace and security, and in this case, we're looking at more weapons of mass destruction, nuclear issues, that our perspectives are included. And many people say, well, it's hard security. Why does it matter? It's all about science and stuff like that. But it's not really just about science. And there's perspectives. Even in science, there's perspectives. Even in math, there's perspectives. It's not as if something is so concrete that a perspective doesn't matter. And also, when we make decisions about nuclear issues or nuclear testing, as we all know, the issue of testing in when we were doing all of that in the US particularly, but in other countries, where the testings took place. And because, if you don't have people at the table saying, don't test there, or what are the ramifications, those voices are absent, and then they can't be represented. And then therefore decisions are made to the detriment of those who do not have a voice. And so it doesn't matter what the issue is. We need to make sure that the process for decisions reflect a variety of perspectives, so that everyone's interests are not only reflected, but also to make sure that the end result is actually a good one. So the goal of the WCAPS is built on all of that. And is built on this concept that we need to advance leadership and professional development of women in the fields of peace, security, and conflict transformation, and ensuring that we are represented in many areas across the board. It doesn't matter what it is. One of the things that we have been able to do is we are now international. This is something I've always wanted to be the case, is that we are outside just the DC or DC New York corridor, and that we are international. And I put the quotation, the explanation points around Ghana, because we have a chapter in Ghana. And so I wanted to highlight that, because if you join, everything's virtual now anyway, but, we do have the perspective of Africa on these issues. And, We'd love for the side note for all of you to be involved in the organization, just by, going to the website and filling out a form, and then you can join the chapter in Africa, because they're going to have programs that are much more focused to the continent and the perspectives there. But anyway, so we do have these chapters outside, and in each one of these, we're trying to look at issues of bringing in voices of people of color, bringing in voices of women of color, regardless of where they are located. And we actually started something called Race Across the Pond initiative, where we are looking at issues of race in different countries. And we had some really good discussions about how race is looked at in France, for example, enlightening me about things I didn't know about the way in which it's viewed there. We have a number of working groups. Of course, the first one we established was the Chemical, Biological, Nuclear, Radiological Security Working Group. A little bias of mine, of course. So that was the first one that was established. But this slide shows all the different working groups, and also reflects the fact, as I said, that we are looking broadly at peace and security to include quote unquote hard security, but a lot of other things as well. Are the expertise within the organization reflect more than even just on these 15 working groups here. We have women that work on racial justice. We have women that work on other issues that are not here, but these are the current working groups. And just increasing the importance and role of women of color. There's connection between cyber and nuclear, for example. So there's opportunities for people and leadership to work with other organizations and highlight, the connections between nuclear and other issues. This is the flyer from our Chemical, Biological, Radiological, Nuclear Security Working Group. And it has objectives, and these are actually on the website. So if you went to wcaps.org, you'd actually see it, because we didn't put these on the website per se, but just wanted to give you a visual of one of the first working group that we established, that we really do want to incorporate the voices of people from around the world, including Africa, into our discussions and our perspectives on this. And the other good thing is, and I'll show you later, is that we've been able to actually do a publication that reflects the voices of women of color on issues of weapons of mass destruction. And that's the kind of thing we need to do to get our voices out there. Just very briefly, we have something called the pipeline of experience, where if you go to the website and you will click on any one of these, and you will see a number of women of color and allies who are members who work in these fields. And this really is to debunk the idea, and Laura mentioned this too, this idea that there's no women that exist on these issues. There's no women of color that exist on these issues. We can't put them on panels, as Laura was talking about. No, we have women of color in these issues. We have women that work on nuclear issues. Click it on and you will see some of them. And you will see that the CBRN link on the website has quite a few women that work on these issues, and young women and seasoned women working on these issues. And this is an opportunity for all of you to see, for yourself, to see who else is in these fields. And really, this is a way to encourage young women who feel like they're by themselves, or feel like I don't see myself represented, to see that, yes, you are. There's quite a few women who work on these issues. I'm not really going to go through all the projects because it'll take too much time, but we do have a number of things which I'll go into detail. One is something called the Redefining National Security Project. And this was something that we started back in 2017. It really underpins a lot of what we do at WCAPS, because it recognizes that the way in which we define security does not really incorporate everyone's perceptions, and really just reflects the perceptions of those who actually have put the definition together. And so we have explored this idea of how do you redefine it so that it really does capture everybody's thoughts and everybody's views, including many of you, all of you, who are listening in now. We also do publications. Why do we do publications? Because many women of color have found it difficult to get their voices heard. And so we did our own thing, which is what I'm all about. I'm like, well, if it's not there, we'll do it ourselves. And so, we had a publication come out late last year, where we captured, and you can see this, it's online, or you can go check it out yourself. And it reflected input from our members who work on CBRN, and also our members who work on global health. And so, and we've had several publications. We're coming out with a new one now on redefining national security. So this is our way to get our voices out. and we will really welcome, your voices as well. As members, we can do more of these kind of publications. We have a fellowship program. It's called a Pipeline Fellowship Program. Another way in which we bring in women, women of color, really young women, really, is for junior high school, and college students um, to meet once a month to talk about issues of peace and security, leadership training. And you don't have to be in the US to be a part of this. You can be anywhere. And this is also on the website. We have a GINSA program, which is a little more stable. I mean, the Pipeline Fellowship Program is a kind of it stops and goes, but the GINSA program really is for young women because we want to get people into the fields, including nuclear. We want to get them in early. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but I didn't do anything or care about these issues at all until I had already, graduated from my master's program. So, we want to get to people early in life. We have a Young Ambassadors program, same concept. We have a podcast series. And the reason why we do that, again, same concept, same theory, that we want young people or even mid-career people or older to hear about other women who are doing work in these fields of peace and security. We have several podcasts by women who work in the field of nuclear. So this is also on our website. So it's for young women who like, again, they want to get involved in some of these issues, but they may not know, excuse my phone. They may feel like they're by themselves. And we just want people to know you're not. We have an art form, which I won't go into for time's sake. And then we have a HBCU Connection, which we just launched 2 weeks ago. And we invited a number of female presidents from various HBCUs to talk about some of the challenges in engaging in global issues, to give more weight to why it's important to talk about global issues at HBCUs. So stay tuned for that because there's going to be a lot more going on with the HBCU Connection. We had Juanita there, who's in the second row. She's the chair of our Ghana chapter. She's also a HBCU grad. So she talked a lot about, the importance of engaging in Africa with HBCUs. I'm going to skip the rest of the slides mainly because we don't have time. We have something called the Organization and Solidarity Project, which I'm not going to go into, but it's what NUMSA was talking about, what we did after the George Floyd event, where we started working with organizations on ways that they can combat racism and discrimination. And a lot of this came because many of our members were saying that they went to work the next day and what happened wasn't being acknowledged. People weren't even saying anything about it. And people were really upset, as you can imagine. And so we realized we needed to do more to work with organizations on these issues. So, you can find out more about that by going to the website. These are the two statements of which the work is based. And so you can go to the website and find out about the commitments that we're working around, that organizations are working around. So I won't go into that, and I'll just leave it this. We have a Twitter account, as same as Laura said about online services and platforms. We have a website, we have a Twitter account, we have a LinkedIn account, we have the list. I mean, everything but Snapchat. I don't do Snapchat, but we have everything else. So if you're interested in any of this, you can go to the website wcaps.org. It has everything I talked about, same with Orgs and Solidarity. And just want to end by saying that, these kind of events are so important. It's really important to be able to have these conversations. It's an honor for me to be here. Like I said, I was able to do this in Ghana. I guess it was 2 years ago. But it's so great to have this platform for connection. And check out the website and become a member. It's free. So thank you, NUMSA. I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, I have to just fangirl for a second because I just think the work that Ambassador Jenkins does is so incredible for women who look like me. And what makes it so incredible was that I might be biased, but she actually had granted me the honor and the permission to lead one of the chapters of her organizations, which is the West Coast chapter of WCAPS. And I think we can all appreciate what a big deal it is to be able to approach somebody of her stature and say, I have this idea with a friend of mine. We would really like it if you gave us your blessing to do it in your name. And she said, go ahead. I didn't have to jump through any hoops. I didn't have to perform. It was just, you have an idea. I like this idea. Please proceed. I hope that everybody who is listening today can really appreciate how important it is to have people like Ambassador Jenkins and Ambassador Holgate, who are basically advocating for the field in general. So you might see or realize the fruits of their labors just by the fact that somebody writes to you and says, oh, hello, you are an expert on nuclear physics. May you please come and speak at our event. That is the work that they're doing. It is important work, and it's the only way, truly, I believe, that we can actually make lasting change in this field. I wanted to just ask Ambassador Jenkins to talk a little bit about your Women of the Month features that you have for WCAPS, where you feature women, just to give our participants a bit more background on that.
Yeah, hold on a second. Let me just see if I can actually, there we go. I'm going to shift for a second. Yeah, so what we do is, as you can see from everything I've been saying, it's all about highlighting women and young girls. I mean, that to me, that is so important about changing the field and making and bringing more people in, is to combat the culture that we have around the world that is constantly telling young girls that they cannot do it, that they cannot make it. That, I can't tell you how many conversations I've had where people have said, I didn't do this because my counselor told me I can't. I'm like, no, no one can tell you what to do. They can give you advice that you could weigh with other advice, but no one should be saying you should do this or you should do that. It's all just advice. Nobody can really do that. And, it bothers me that that's happened. And, people have not done things that they really wanted to do. But that's just an example of the constant bombardment that we get as women, as young girls, as people of color, about what we can do. For me, it's all about what we can do. So one of the things that I decided that I wanted to do was to have a constant reminder of the women who are doing great things. And so what we have done is we've started this Women of the Month, and you can see here the Women of the Month from January. And we do this every month. We select, one's a young ambassador, one is a, one's a young ambassador, one is a more seasoned woman, I guess the best way to put it, who we highlight. And you can go to the website and you can see all the women who we've selected. You see Juanita there. And so it's just another way to just keep reminding people that we're out there, we're great, we do these things, we're experts, we're young in the field, we're older in the field, we are good, and it's just keep, one thing I always wanted to put all over the website was everywhere you go, there's a reminder of just how amazing we are, and wherever you go on the website, you can see that. So these are our women from 2019. And they're amazing. And so that's what it is, very briefly. So thanks.
Thank you, Ambassador Jenkins. So our participants enjoyed a panel discussion with Raina Rogers yesterday, and she was talking about her modeling of rockets and missiles and how they find what DPRK is doing or not doing and things of that nature. And they also enjoyed a panel discussion with Sylvia Mishra, who is obviously the CBRN working group co-chair, and she's very active. So I hope our participants are deriving some inspiration. And I'm sorry, it's just something that I do, but I'm not going to let you leave these incredible women without bombarding them with questions, without sharing your own contact information and your own stories to make sure that they put you on. Both Ambassador Holgate and Jenkins spoke about publishing. So if you have something that you want to publish in your field, you should be reaching out to them to say, oh, I wanted to publish something for my country. Perhaps it's in Arabic, maybe it's in a different language. But do you have something with WCAPS that can help me sort of get the attention of bigger publications? This is your time. This is your moment. Please don't wait. We are now operating. I know sometimes, African culture, we're like a bit reticent, but these are Americans. Bombard them. They appreciate forthrightness. And on that note, I'm going to open it up for question and answer. We have the Q&A box is already jump in. We'll take these questions in order. So I think the first question is for Ambassador Holgate, and then the next two are for Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins. So the floor is yours, ambassadors.
The question about how the Gender Champions model might be exported to other environments or communities or fields. And I can say, I know that that's doable because that's exactly what I did. I took this idea from the diplomatic world called International Gender Champions that involved heads of UN organizations and the ambassadors that were representing to them and women's organizations in that field. And I modified that idea for the nuclear policy field. And so that can be done for any field. And the point is to figure out who are the leaders of the relevant organizations in the field in which one wants to create this initiative, and then to figure out how to reach those individuals. There's different models and different cultures. This works differently. In the International Gender Champions model, my role model there, the woman I learned from, former US Ambassador Pamela Hamamoto, said it was really important that a peer reach out to another peer to invite them to join. I will say that has not been the model we've followed in the Gender Champions area, where my co-chair and I, or my co-founder and I, Michelle Dover, who works at Plowshares Foundation, I think the issue, our secret sauce was that we actually had the foundations involved. And so, me with my background and reputation, even though I wasn't the leader of an organization, I was able to connect to, on a personal level in many cases, a bit in many cases not, to the heads of organizations that we wanted to be part of this, and to have the weight of Michelle Dover representing the funding community going along with that. That really brought some additional heft to the notion that this was something that funders would be expecting. And so the key question then, once you identify what organizations are most critical to begin an effort of change and who the leaders are, is how do you get to those leaders? What is the best way to bring the argument to them about why gender equity matters, and then to bring a toolkit. We have what we call a welcome packet that is essentially a deep explanation of what Gender Champions is, what is expected of the champions and of the focal points, a whole list of potential pledges just to spark creativity, and a whole range of other tools that can be used to design what works for their own organization. And then we, work with them to develop their pledges. Most of them come to us and say, hey, this is what we're thinking of. What do you think? And so then we give them a platform on the website to be recognized and promoted, and to see what the pledges are that they've made. And so it can be started from kind of a grassroots effort, and to develop a sense of, what is meaningful, what actions are meaningful, both based on research and based on what is known within that culture and that country and that community as beneficial to enhancing the equity around women. And so those are other, those can be kind of assembled in a system that works for you. So I think there's the key issue is having resources that allow you to touch the top of an organization and encourage them to be part of the network, and then to use those who've already joined, start with the ones that you think are already on board, and then move to the harder ones over time. And so that's kind of the model that I brought and adapted from a different environment. And so that's available for your environments as well, perhaps.
So you heard what Ambassador Holgate said. For those who are asking about bringing this initiative to Africa, she said, imitation is the best form of flattery. And once you've set up some version of that, you can always send her an email and invite her to attend and partner with your organization. Ambassador Jenkins, there's a couple questions for you as well.
Okay. Looking for him. Okay. What does it take to become a WCAPS member? Oh, I lost it. Okay. What does it take to become a WCAPS member? Does it have a financial implication in terms of registration? No. To become a member, you just go to the website. It's on near the top of the website. There's a big box that says become a member. There is no charge. It's free. So it's really easy. And when you fill out the form, you can also indicate, which working groups you want to join, which chapters you want to join, if you want to be part of the mentorship program. There's a couple of other things there that you can check off. Your area expertise, if you want to be on the pipeline of experience page. So yeah, it's actually really easy. And we also have the the Gen Zer, the Gen Zer group that you can join. I mean, all of that's on the membership form. So I would encourage you to go to the membership part of the website and just click that and you can fill it out. There's no charge. Shed some light on the concepts of hard and soft security. That I don't actually like to use those terms, but I use those terms because there is a history of people quickly understanding what that means. And, even I say now that in the work that I do, in my perspective, there's a lot more interrelationships between them. So hard security is what they call weapons of mass destruction, for example. Missiles, guns, those kind of things. Soft security would be things like infectious disease or climate change, security implications of climate change or food security or water security. So that's that's how the two have often been separated. And so when people say that, that's one way to understanding the two. They've also used soft security as what they call human security. A lot of those same things that are affecting, people directly in terms of whether they have food, whether they have water, things like that. So that's what that is. But having said that, as I said, I tend to look at them both as an integrated whole. Okay, and yeah, Nigerian chapter. Yes, that has actually been under discussion. So if anyone, and I put in the chat a way to contact me, that is a discussion that's going on. So, and we also have one of our chairs of one of our working groups has been very vocal about establishing a chapter in Nigeria. So that's definitely under consideration.
We have a question from Bernadette, and she wants to ask it live. Bernadette, you have the floor.
Please unmute yourself. Okay. Bernadette, if you want to speak, please unmute yourself. I moved you to the speakers. You could speak. Maybe not.
Okay, I guess we can. We have another question in the Q&A, and the question is, why do we raise gender? Is this correct? Charles, did you want to ask this question yourself live? So basically somebody's asking why we draw attention to gender at all in the field of STEM and nuclear security. any one of you can take that.
Well, I think the point is that men and women and many other types of diversity have different experiences and different knowledge from how they've worked and lived in the world. And for example, in nuclear security, a lot of the issue has to do with, what we call security culture. We talked about this a little bit last week in the session that I was part of, and where it's important that everyone in an organization that uses or works with nuclear materials or radiological materials, that they understand the risks of that and that they take appropriate care. Well, that community is a diverse community. And so if you're going to be setting rules and expectations for how people behave, for how to promote that nuclear security culture, you need to have people who are part of that rulemaking process or part of that culture shaping process, who themselves have that diversity of perspective, who understand that certain kind of arguments resonate with some people, whereas other kinds of arguments resonate with another group, and to be able to bring all of those perspectives together. But also to recognize that there's different types of sensitivities around the challenges that come with working in a nuclear environment. And so that's just one example. Another example is when assumptions get made about what people are living with, or what their experiences have been, and by people who are not, who don't have a broader perspective, and then the environment that they create is not functioning for people. The notion that all, for example, work hours or work expectations, if the idea is that shifts for a guard force are always 12-hour shifts, that might not work for everybody who you would want, who might be a good guard. And so how do you understand how to be more flexible, or to create additional ways of structuring the workday that accommodate a range of participants? And it's that, if you don't have people who are part of those decision-making processes, then you're not going to be able to have a workforce that is as capable and effective as these large responsibilities require. So it's really about how do you bring that strength of diversity of perspective into every level of operation of an organization.
Thank you for that, Ambassador Holgate. I think it's also just worth remembering that for everyone, that women make up 50% of the population. So the question shouldn't be, why are we talking about gender? The question should be, why are we not talking about gender? Why do you go in a room and look around and think, oh, okay, half of the world's population is not represented in this room, but they're making decisions for everyone. I mean, don't get me started, but.
No, so I'll just give an example of one of our gender champions, Seth Gray, who is the head of a nuclear fuel cycle company called Lightbridge. They do a lot of consulting for different countries that are creating nuclear energy programs. And they helped design the nuclear energy program for the United Arab Emirates. And they said, because the population of educated people in the UAE was so small, that gender equity was a critical principle of how they're going to build their nuclear energy program, which was very different from the existing culture in that country. But they said, you are not going to be able to hire enough people. You're not going to be able to train enough people to actually do this job if you are not bringing everybody on board. And so they built in, things that were very different from the prevailing culture about, who can be supervisors, who can give direction, who can be promoted, what's the basis of promotion, what's the basis for hiring, and to be sure that women had access to all levels of that organization based on their skills and their competencies, in order to achieve this national goal of, a very sophisticated, technical, expensive, high consequence program. And they recognized right from the get-go that if they left half their population on the other side of the gate, they were not going to get the job done.
There you have it, folks. Ambassador Jenkins, there's a question here from Altrine Obiero about the linkages between the promotion of greater gender equality and disarmament, especially how do you do it without ending up with a warning letter on your desk, given that the work environment might be male dominated and the culture and the leadership is not very, I suppose, progressive. So how does one navigate those waters? Both of you can actually answer this question as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it, I think a lot of it is, whether you're talking about gender, whether you're talking about race, I think that it's important to be in a space where, and I think the question is, how do you do that and maybe not get repercussions, or how do you do that in a situation where you don't know, what's going to be felt. I mean, I think one of the first things to do, is to first of all feel that you recognize that you have a right to express your feelings. You have a right to acknowledge, or have others acknowledge that you want to have an expression of thought, and of course you need to make that decision within yourself. And then you need to find allies. You need to find others within your organization, who you can, depending on how comfortable you feel, and if you're ready to, to say something, or just to, highlight things that may not be highlighted. I mean, it depends on the situation you're in and your comfort level, and, who the other people are. But I think it's about navigating the situation to a place where you feel that you are 100% yourself. And so that is a process of thinking about how do you get there. And that means the navigation part, which is, finding allies within your space, who are, it may not, they may not look like you, or if you're the only person who is of yourself, it means finding allies who may not be like you. And that's what a lot of time allies are. And finding a way in which you can make your concerns known. Now, there may be places, maybe places that work where it just may not be possible. And I recognize that there may be some places where, that the concept of you being who you are, of your 100% self is a threat to others, or they just don't want to accept it, or they just want to, or they feel very comfortable in the status quo and don't want to change the status quo, or they are threatened by a change in culture and how it's going to impact them. I mean, and so you have to really get a sense of what is a possibility, and it just may not be possible in some places. And then you'll have to make a decision. Um, and there's a lot of things to take into account about where you are in that space, and what you can do in that space, and how happy you are in that space, and whether you can get the work done, and your own mental health in that space. And these are things that you have to consider, and what are your other demands in your life. And so these are all the things that you have to take into account. But I would certainly at least explore the possibilities of, challenging, and I'd say challenging with a cat in quotation mark, because I don't mean run in there and start screaming, but, and maybe you want to do that, that's fine, but doing it in a way that you feel like you have allies with you. And some people may be more amenable than you think they are, but if they've never been challenged, they don't have a reason to think different. They don't have a reason to think that what I'm thinking may not be right. But do that with the understanding that you are willing to live with what may result. And if it doesn't turn out the way you want, are you happy to stay where you are, or do you want to move other places? So it takes thinking and maneuvering and working the situation based on the organization and your own needs at the time and your own desires. So some thoughts.
Thank you. Margarita, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's always such a great pleasure to hear you, Laura, and you, Bonnie. I want you to actually spotlight one of the comments which is in the chat, and I hope a person who posted it will not mind. In her country, she said that there are technical fields are considered mostly male profession. And what she brings up is that, it starts with the family, where girls are expected to have certain career paths if they decide to have a career. and it starts with the family and then culture and society. How do we all, as the international community, help overcome the stereotype, and where women could pursue their careers without being pulled back by something that holds them, in the families? How do we do this? What can we do? Are there any action plans that we could all follow?
I can go first.
Please.
I felt since I talked along last time, I think it takes courage. It takes courage, first of all, and it takes pushing back. And one of the things that one of the things I was thinking about when I started WCAPS is I really wanted to be a place where if you are a young, I might have mentioned this already, if you are a young person who is different, quote unquote, in whatever that means, in a space where you are pushing against a culture, and in this respect, it's going to be, let's say, a young woman of color or a young person of color, and you, a young woman, and you want to be in a field that's considered, male or science or everything. The first thing to do, as I said, a lot of it is starting with yourself in your own comfort. And so one of the things that I always wanted WCAPS to be is, I don't care where you're located, there's a place where a lot of it's role models. It's a lot of it getting your own sense of strength to be ready to go against a culture, particularly if there's no one in your environment that's even interested in it. And we recognize that a lot of times it is engaging family as well. A lot of times it's not just the individual, because if you're a young person or an older person and you're the only one that wants to do something in a field where no one is, it is engaging family and others. But I think, starting with role models, helping others to see that there are other people in these fields, share that information with them, sit down and help explain it. I mean, and like I said in the last question, there may be some people who you just can't get through, and you have to recognize that too. But, because if they haven't, I mean, it may be because they haven't seen the role models, they haven't seen what's different, and so helping them to understand that, it doesn't have to be this particular way, or look at all these people who are doing this field, and look at all these, and look at how successful they are, look at what they're doing, and look at what they've achieved. And sometimes it's and using that same education and exposure that we're trying to give to young women in this case, it's the same that you can be using with those in your environment, to help, because they may not have seen it either, and so you want to help them you want to bring them along, as much as you can. And like I said before, there may be a case where they just won't be brought. And then that may be a case where you'll just have to make a decision about, this is something I really want to do, and understanding that there are difficulties in doing that. But sometimes it's helping them to understand in the same way that we're trying to help the young people understand. It's anyone who doesn't understand it, and you want to give them the tools to make that change, or the tools to make that leap. So that's just some thoughts there.
I just want to emphasize something that Bonnie said about role models and this notion that we hear over and over as we talk about diversity is, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And the importance of visibility for women of color, all kinds of diversities, to be visible in the world. And so as a young person who's aspiring to, a non-traditional field, to do your research and find who are people like you. They may not be visible, you might have to dig for them, but they do exist. And to bring, if you have an opportunity to make a personal connection with them, that's even better. But if they're, like a national figure, or, someone with, some level of visibility, you can bring that into your family conversation and, highlight, because it's not just, I mean, there's a point in the, Namsa, your point about, what if I fall, but what if you fly? I mean, parents are, maybe this limitation may be coming from a place of love and concern for their children, not a place of cruelty and limitation, but they're just so worried. And so to be able to see, yes, there are paths for success. There are individuals who have achieved those paths. There are ways that can be followed. And so just to work really hard to find those individuals that may be those examples. And then if you can build a relationship with one or two of them to understand what steps they took to break the barriers to, and to whether or not there are steps that they've left behind that you can follow. And so I think that's just, there's so many aspects to that role model impact that really are so critical to moving people out of an environment where they feel very limited.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Holgate, for saying that, because I want to share a story from Tom Countryman from Arms Control Association. He came to CNS 2 summers ago when we were still in person, and he addressed our young undergraduate fellows. And I remember asking him something related to the whole, how is Arms Control Association, you know, like a very plucky reporter. I'm like, how is Arms Control Association upholding like gender balance and parity? And then he said, well, my organization has a rule that if a reporter calls asking for a quote, the first question I ask them is, have you asked any female experts for a quote? If they say no, then I'm like, I don't want to answer this question. Please go ahead and do some homework, or you can contact, and he'll give them a few names and say, once you get a quote from them, I'd be more than happy to give you one if you still need it. And it just amazed me, because it's such a simple thing to do, but it is a little bit more selfless than maybe some people are inclined to be, to say, I'm not going to entertain your questions. I'm not going to be quoted in a newspaper unless you've done the same because there are female experts. Or to say, I'm not attending this panel because there are no female experts in the room, which then puts pressure on the organization or whoever institution to make sure that they are meeting those goals. So people are asking, how can they do this in their fields? I suppose if you invite NTI or Arms Control Association to speak at a panel, they're going to send women. And then what that does, if you're looking for a way to sort of influence without saying too much, what that does is whether it's your government or whether it's your institution, the next time they're holding a panel, it's a little bit harder to justify why there's only men or why there's only a particular race in the room. That's my 2 cents. But yes, CNS is also part of the Gender Champions Project. We are great supporters of that. And I think we are going to bring everything to a close now. For those of y'all who have been listening, I hope you slid into their DMs and sent some direct messages and said, hi, my name is Nomsa, and I'm very interested in starting a chapter in Tanzania. May I contact you, or who can I contact from your office to do something? Or I want to launch an initiative for gender champions in my country. Hi, Ambassador Holgate, who can I get in touch with from your organization? I'm going to hold you to account, people. Thank you very much, Ambassador Holgate and Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins. This has been an incredible experience, and I'm sure you're going to get some contacts from people and great feedback in the future.